If you guys like negativity, raise your hand. I didn't think so, and neither do I. And we constantly seek people in our lives that think more positively and pull us into a better way of thinking. The person I'm bringing on today has done exactly that. We crushed an Armor Up workout this morning, and he already corrected and tweaked some of my verbiage, which the way we think, the way we talk, the way we communicate, the way we live out our lives, everything matters to who we're becoming. And you talk about adversity, you talk about the will to fight. Well, who I'm about to bring on today is going to bring exactly that. And they have an amazing story. They're an author, they're a speaker. They have a system of the way of breaking down information and understanding how to recognize what's going on in your life, to get off the X. We talk about getting off the X all the time. And if you don't know what that means, stay tuned for this episode. I talk about Armor Up, and we crushed that workout this morning. I cannot tell you how humbling it's been to watch this Armor Up program, which is our fitness program, by the way, which Dynamis Alliance launched a couple months ago, how effective it has been in people's lives, literally changing the way people are thinking about approaching fitness, about their lifestyle. I always talk about mental, physical, and spiritual armor. We are putting that armor on every single day, which is why we named it Armor Up. We want to make you guys better in every aspect. And when you talk about the success of a program, what does success mean? Well, first of all, we have to define success in all of our lives to figure out where we're going. What is success? How do I get to success? To me, the Armor Up program, success is completely equal to progress. Progress is success. And when I watch the feedback of this program, I can't even keep up with the great things that I'm hearing at this point. And the private Facebook page that we have set up and everything else has become a sanctuary for positive thinking, watching people progress, hitting PRs, bettering their life, losing weight. I mean, it has been pretty epic. So if you guys haven't already, go to train.dynamisalliance.com. Check out Armor Up. It is badass. It's making an impact. And that's my mission. It's become a part of my mission. I am literally in the gym every day. I am literally spending time trying to reprogram the way that I think every day to think more positive, to be the best version of myself, to give you guys that feedback and value each and every day. So go check out the program. It's something I'm most passionate about right now, and it's kicking ass. This podcast is sponsored by Redcon One. You know the deal. It's my favorite supplement company. And I'll say the product that I'm most excited about lately is this bad boy right here. It's called Breach Ballistic, or, if you're a team guy and you kick down doors for a living, you might call it Ballistic Breach. I don't know. But it's energized BCAAs. And I haven't really seen anybody who put that combo together in watermelon before, and this is one of my favorite things that I've been drinking. Usually I'll take it mid-workout because it gives you those chain amino acids with a little bit of energy, but it's also a great midday pickup to get some more BCAAs in your system. But this product, it tastes awesome, and I've been using this probably more than anything else, including the Total War. That's one of my go-tos. The Total War pre-workout. I've actually run across a lot of people that haven't taken a pre-workout before. And I'm going to tell you, if you're dragging ass, why do I use a pre-workout? I use a pre-workout for the days that I am dragging ass and I need to get that little bit of a pick-me-up to just get to the gym in the first place. Remember, showing up is half the battle. When I'm doing a high-intensity day where I know I'm going to get a really, really high heart rate, I'll usually stay away from the Total War or at least take less of it. But those days that you're dragging butt, take some Total War, and it will help you get to the gym. Show up. That's what it's all about. Those guys are kicking ass. Go check them out, redcon1.com, and don't forget to use code DOM, D-O-M, to save 20% on everything that you order. I'm humbled, and I'm honored to have this next guest on. Stay tuned, and let's crush this episode. We are all going to have to fight. I don't care if it's mentally, physically, or spiritually. We are all going to have to fight for something in our lives. My goal is to help you forge your will to fight, to become the best that you can possibly be for yourself, your family, and everybody else around you. I'm Dom Raso. Welcome to the Will to Fight podcast. All right, guys, I am fired up for this episode, and we always talk about the people in our lives that we want to surround ourselves that make us better. And just today, interacting with this individual that I have here in front of me today, he instantly shifted my mindset. And as somebody that constantly looks for better ways of thinking about things, better ways of talking about things, and just to improve my overall life, it's a blessing when you find those people. And just today, I said, you know what? We're all going to have bad days. And he instantly corrected me and said, we're going to have hard days and we're going to have tough days. And I'm going to read something to you because it hit me pretty hard. And I want you guys to understand who this man really is. And I think this sums up pretty friggin' well. He was overseas and he was in a battle. He was in a firefight, and we all visualized that moment. And he had to go through some pretty serious adversity. And after he was laid up in the hospital recovering, this is the sign that he put out on front of his door. Attention to all who enter here. If you're coming into this room with sorrow or to feel sorry for my wounds, go elsewhere. The wounds I received, I got in a job I love. I love doing it for people I love, supporting the freedom of a country I deeply love. I am incredibly tough and will make a full recovery. What is full? That is the absolute utmost physically my body has been the ability to recover. Then I will push about 20% further through the sheer mental tenacity. This room you are about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense, rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. From the management. I have somebody in front of me that has been able to regrow his mindset and reforge his mindset, and thousands of people he's interacted with. He is a father, a family man, a Christian, a warrior, an author, a speaker, and there's so much about this man that I have in front of me. I am so fired up to have you on the podcast. Guys, welcome Jason Redman. Brother, it is so good to have you here.
Dom, man, awesome. I love it. Thank you for the incredible intro and for the good workout this morning too.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we got to fire our brains up and stay engaged. And, you know, we were already high-fiving as soon as you walked in. You hit a PR yesterday doing bench. And I was like, we're going to do more bench today. We're going to do more chest.
Big shout out to my coach, Steven Johnson. Yeah, man. And everybody needs coaches. A lot of people miss that point, I think. Sometimes they think, oh, you know, I can do it on my own. But all of us surrounding ourselves with the right people, find the right people that help you narrow in on the things we need to do.
Yeah, we have an opportunity each and every day to have a higher awareness of who we're around and who we surround ourselves with. And even just wanting you to be on this podcast and let people know about who you are and what you've been through, there's value to what you're putting out in the world. I look forward to listening to your live videos, and it's something that we're all evolving. We talked about adapting each and every day. So when you say something through your experiences and where you've learned to be better, it's just something that I look for each and every day. And you already did it for me. I'm literally going to take that away for the rest of my life. It's shifted instantaneously. And that's the one thing about when you have experience. You take these things on and you say, that's getting applied today, and it will. I won't screw that up again, I promise.
Well, here's the funny thing. You will, because I've done it too. Because we're all guilty. Yep. We're all guilty, but I try to eradicate that word from my vocabulary. If we proclaim I'm having a bad day, which everybody does, it sets the tone for your day. So if you say, you know, this is a rough day, it's a hard day, this is a tough day, that's a different mindset. Those are things that we overcome. Those are things that we drive through. You're already planting those negative seeds if you proclaim it's a bad day. You now own it.
Yeah. 100%. And it's a mindset. So, like you said, that's a mindset. What we choose each and every day to think about. And some people are living with the lie. Some people are living with the excuse. And that can't be overwhelming above the voice that needs to outshine that and outweigh that each and every day. You walked in with a shirt this morning that said, overcome. And I don't know why, but I'm hyper aware of using that. I wonder why, you being in the building. But I think I use that word a lot. We have to overcome and adapt. We have to adapt and overcome. And that's been a huge part of your journey, bro. And I want you to be able to talk more about that. So talking about who you were before you were in the military, maybe give everybody a quick highlight on, you know, a little bit of your background about why you are the way you are, how you grew up, and where you got to today.
You know, it's funny. I wish I could tell you this incredible story of how I was this beat kid who was abused and grew up on the hard streets of XYZ city in America, but none of that's true. I'm not. I'm probably about the most unlikely, average, underdog, scrawny kid who ended up becoming a SEAL. I don't know. I don't want to say against all odds, because you and I know that the SEAL teams are made up of such a dynamic, diverse cross-section of America. But, you know, I grew up in a good home. We were poor. We didn't have a lot of money. My family, my grandfather on my dad's side had a family business. They were big into real estate in Ohio, and that business went under. And we ended up moving to North Carolina, literally into the country sticks tobacco country of North Carolina. And I grew up there, which was a good thing, because as a young kid, it had me out in the woods, and I got appreciation for the outdoors. I got appreciation for hard work. But, you know, nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, I dabbled in sports when I was younger. I wanted to get more into sports, and but I was always on the small side. I mean, you know, my mom's like 4'11", you know, my dad's like 5'9", you know, I'm 5'8", and, you know, about 170 is my average weight. But back then, as a high school kid, you know, in ninth grade, I was literally the 95-pound weakling. And I told my dad, I want to play football. I want to do these things. And he was like, no, you're too small. You're too small. And finally, I don't know what it was, man. One day I told my dad, I said, I'm going to play football. And he was like, no, you're too small. And I was like, I'm doing it.
How old were you?
I was probably 14, you know, and I hadn't played a lick of football my entire life. And if we had lived in a bigger city, it never would have happened. But, you know, this tiny town, tiny high school, went out for the football team, and they were like, sure, you can be a tackling dummy. And, man, I got the snot knocked out of me right and left. But what I started to learn about myself is I had a lot of heart, and I wasn't afraid to get in there. I wasn't afraid to put myself out there and just get blasted over and get back up and go again. And I started learning things about myself. I learned the value of being part of a team. I learned the value of hard work. And it was right about that time. I'd grown up in this patriotic family. My dad had been in the Army during Vietnam. He didn't serve in Vietnam. He was an airborne instructor and a rigger during the Vietnam War. So he trained guys out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky back then. And he had met SEALs at that time, back then, before they really even knew what they were. And, you know, as I got older, I kind of got infatuated with the military, and I said, that's the road I want to go down. I love the fact that my dad was a paratrooper. My grandfather was a decorated World War II pilot, B-24 pilot, flew all his missions, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medals, and I was like, that's what I want to do too. So about the age of 14 or 15, my dad said, hey, I went through training with these guys. You know, they're considered some of the toughest guys in the world, you know, super elite, super hard training. You know, if you really want to push yourself and that's where you want to go, then you should look into that. And I was like, okay, roger that. So here I was, 95-pound weakling, tackling dummy on the football team, and started exploring, and you really couldn't find anything. This is late 80s at this point. You really couldn't find hardly anything about the SEAL teams. And by sheer happenstance, a guy at our church was a special operations aficionado. He just kind of collected everything he could find about it. And he actually knew about the SEAL teams and their training, and he shared with me what he had and their training, what they went through. And I was like, dude, that is what I want to do. So I remember the first time I proclaimed it, and people laughed me right out of the building. You know, I mean, like I said, you know, I mean, I think the average American envisions SEALs as like this 6'5" Arnold Schwarzenegger, muscle-bound guy, you know, not this 95-pound skinny, you know, string bean kid. And but it lit my fire. It just, there's something in me that if you tell me I can't do something, it only fuels me to want to do it more. And I started pursuing it. I went out for the wrestling team the next year thinking, hey man, this is going to be good for me, learning to push myself, train myself, and really started training. just started focusing on trying to get my body stronger with my body weight, running, pull-ups, push-ups, started swimming and getting ready. And I think the final thing that really kind of pushed me into this, the beginning of this overcome mindset, and I'll tell you what, it is the story of my life. I am, I think a lot of people look at me and say, wow, you're a really successful guy. But dude, at my heart and soul, and I tell people, you know what I am an expert at? Failure. I have failed so many times. I've been knocked down so many times. I've been told no so many times. I've been told you can't do this so many times. And for whatever reason, I ignore it and just go, I don't care what you say. I'm going to keep going. And same thing happened when I showed up to the recruiting station when I was, 15 years old. I went in there and said, I want to be a SEAL. And they laughed me right out of the office. They were like, beat it. Don't waste our time. You're not SEAL material. And I kept coming back, and they kept chasing me out of the station. And in late 80s, you still had some crusty dudes in the Navy. And first class petty officer that ran that recruiting station, he finally had enough, and he basically threatened to kick my ass if I came back in there again. So I was like, okay, well, maybe this isn't going to work. I'll go join the Army, and I'll become a Ranger. So I actually went down that path. And I had ruptured my eardrum as a kid. So when I went to MEPS at 16 to 17, I went to MEPS. I failed the airborne physical because when they looked in, they saw the scar tissue in my ear, and they said, oh, you can't equalize. And I said, well, that's not true, man. I've dove. I know I can do these things. So because of that, though, I told the Army, well, fine, I'm not going to sign up with you guys if you won't let me go airborne. Went back to the Navy. That first class was gone. There was a new recruiter there. His name's Henry Horn. I've never been able to track Henry down. I hope someday I can. But Henry welcomed me and was like, hey, man, you want to be a SEAL? Absolutely, I'll help you. And sure enough, man, he got me into the pipeline and said, hey, you need a rate. We're going to get you in the Navy. And the rest was history. But Henry was kind of the first guy I'd met along the way who actually said, all right, I'm going to help you accomplish your dream, and didn't, degrade it or make fun of it. So, as long as you believe in yourself, ultimately you'll find somebody who will help you and who will help push you. And for the 10,000 no's that I've encountered, there was always one or two people along the way who said, hey, man, I love your dream and your fire. I'm going to help it.
That's amazing. And I look back at so many people's journey, and each and every time somebody was placed in their life at some point, whether it was a sentence or a whole engagement that got them to shift gears. You met that guy, Henry. Me and my buddy John that grew up across the street from each other from Divine Canines. We were best friends growing up. He had an uncle that was telling him about what SEALs were. And he's like, what are SEALs? Like, these are the most badass guys in the existence. We're like, okay, well, we got to find out more about that. And we did some research. And there's always somebody that knows a little bit more, but the reason that's inspiring to me, and I think that it should for a lot of other guys out there in leadership positions, is that don't forget that you could be that guy to somebody. Don't forget that somebody's listening to you and somebody's looking up to what you can bring to the table to inspire them. And I think that's awesome. Like, to me, that's a badass journey. You have that first class petty officer that's just like, nope, I'm going to put my foot down and stop you from your dream. And, you just came full circle right back there anyway, just to try again.
Yeah.
Persistence.
Yeah.
It just shows you about persistence.
Overcome, man. That's the reason why it's my word. It is, I don't care what you tell me. I'm going to figure out a way. Over, under, around, or through. There's a way to the other side, and don't let someone tell you or, don't let someone put you in a box and say, you're not right for this because because you don't fit a specific demographic that somebody tries to say and in any situation. And that's what drives me insane about the current culture we live in. We want to place everybody into 100%. Boxes.
Yes.
We want to say, because you came from a specific background, you can never achieve a level of success. Because you're a specific race and you grow up in a specific area, you're never going to be successful. And that's such a lie. You own the power. You have a choice. As long as you live in this country where freedom and opportunity are the two most powerful things you own, you can go after it. So
100%.
Ignore what people tell you and believe in yourself and drive forward.
If you have the passion and you love something that much, I can't tell you how much I got ridiculed in high school. I wore do you remember that shirt? if you run, you'll only die tired. You remember that old
Yeah, the old sniper shirt.
I wore that to school the first time, and every kid I knew made fun of me. The teachers were looking at me like, what is he wearing right now? What is that shirt? I remember almost sitting by myself because people were just ridiculing me, pointing their finger at me, laughing at me. And I loved the idea of being where I was in the military so much. I didn't let any of that bother me. And I think that's exactly what you just said. And what I heard reconfirmed again is that if somebody's listening to this, if you're doing what you love and you're going after what you're passionate about, you cannot let what other people think about that idea slow you down at all, or else you won't get there. And you have to listen to your heart, man. So that's just one more part of that. And that overcome of what you've done and where you are today. Like, I love the mission that you're on right now. I mean, I'm just going to jump forward into where you are today because I think it's so valid, and Jason's out there adding huge amount of value, at speaking engagements, what he's doing with his social media. And it's about that forward thinking and about that positivity and who you're becoming. I mean, the sign on his door about what he went through, and I want to get to that Will to Fight story, but today, where you are in everything that you're doing about overcoming. What does overcome mean to you right now? Right where you sit right now today?
Overcome means really at the heart and soul, overcome, the fundamental part of it is overcoming yourself. That is the biggest enemy you'll ever fight. And definitely for me, I mean, I'll never forget, someone once asked me, what's the biggest thing you've ever overcome? And I told them myself. And I'm constantly overcoming myself. Yes. I don't care who you are. I don't care what level of game you're at. You can be at the top of any game, professional athlete. The demons that live in your head are the most dangerous enemy you'll ever fight. And the question is, are you going to give in to them and believe them, or are you going to overcome them and push back those fears and those doubts and continue to drive forward? Because most people in life don't. And that truly is what overcome is about. And so my mission has been to help people. How do you become the best version of yourself? Design the Pentagon of Peak Performance for those 5 key areas where we have to lead ourselves. That creates that balance and enables us to go through life and be happy and content with who we are, and to be ready, which, you with everything you're doing, preparing people for anything that comes along. I mean, now we're starting to get into the whole life ambushes, and whether they're real world, a fighting ambush, or oftentimes what's so much more dangerous is the emotional and mental ambushes that come along and crush us. So all of it is to be the best version of yourself that's ready for anything that will come along, so that you can be the best leader of yourself first and foremost. You can be the best leader of others, your family, coworkers, teammates, friends. And then last, that you can be confident to know that you're going to lead always, that you'll make the right decisions. Your moral compass and your ethics are right, so that it doesn't matter who's looking or who's around. You're going to do the right thing and drive forward. And that's tough. It's a tough road, but if you follow that, at the end of the day, and that's really what I hope to accomplish. Someday I want to get to the end of my life, and other people will say, man, I liked being around that guy because he helped me to be better. And for all the flaws that I have, I mean, that's my mission and that's my goal, to help other people overcome and be the best version of themselves.
I love it. And I always hear you say, get off the X. Now, that's something that I can relate to in my sleep. I don't need to think about it. I know about being on the X.
Yeah.
But I think the way that you relate it to people's lives is so huge, so huge. And I know that you've got a whole system that you've created based off of your experiences, and I have no doubt that you're refining that every day. I already see the impact it's making on people. So when you talk about being on the X, which, by the way, if you guys don't know, being on the X for us is at the pinnacle of the operation. It is on the X where we plan on executing everything that we wanted to with a violent plan executed now, moving in flow, whether it's high value targets, placing breaches. I mean, we are on the X. We are at the most dangerous part of the operation in that moment. And the idea is that if we do get contacted or something happens, we do either want to get off the X or figure out how to maneuver. But everything in the mission profile is created based off of that X. So without going into too much tactical information, I want you to be able to break this down for people on what the X means to you.
So the X to me is defined, so the X for me is defined at any point of attack. The central point of attack is the X. And, and it was interesting how this is all developed, because it's developed over the last several years. And really how it hit me one day like a punch in the face. I was working with a wounded warrior as part of our Overcome Academy. He was a medic that was serving in Iraq at the very beginning of the war. And his convoy of armored vehicles drove over an incredibly large IED, the vehicle in front of him, detonated and literally lifted this armored vehicle up off the ground, slammed it back down. It's on fire. He gets out of his vehicle and he ran forward to get up to the vehicle to try and assist. He was on the driver's side, excuse me, and the young kid that was behind the wheel is trying to get out of the vehicle, and the blast actually penetrated the inside of the vehicle. So the inside of the vehicle is on fire. Well, it actually twisted the frame of the vehicle, the shock wave of the blast. So this kid's trying to get out. The medic is trying to open the door, but it had jammed the door shut. And this medic literally watched this kid burn alive in front of his eyes through the window, and it destroyed him. His soul died right there. And he came home and checked out. He got out of the military, and for almost 10 years, he didn't leave his house. Like, he just stopped living. And I remember him telling me this story, and it hit me in the face like a bat in that moment. I was like, oh my God, like, you never left that ambush in Iraq. Like, you have stayed on the X. You have chained yourself to the X since you left. And it like flooded me. Like, I had met all these people, and including myself, these hard moments I've had in my life, and you and I and warriors, we spend our entire lives on how do we take the fight to the enemy and pin the enemy to the X. And then how do we, either unleash as much overwhelming firepower as possible that we either kill your will to fight and you surrender and we capture you and we get information that way, or, we kill your will to fight and we kill you. I mean, one or the other, but no matter what, it is our goal to pin you to the point that you're so overwhelmed that you cannot respond back. And I realized when that Marine told me that, or that medic told me that, I was like, man, everybody in life gets stuck on the X. I survived that ambush that I was in Iraq because my teammates were able to get off the X as quickly as possible. And that was the flip side that you and I had learned, that in order to survive any attack, you have to get off the X as quickly as possible. Yep. Whether you fight through it or, blow off of it or, flank around, whatever you have to do, the faster you get off the X. And I realized, man, these principles apply in life. And I really started to peel back the onion, looking at how it had applied to different things that I encountered in my life. And it started to unfold, and I just started writing, and I started realizing that everybody in life encounters these life ambushes, and they come in different levels. And the micro ambushes are the ambushes of the mind. And I would say that the average person will encounter one of those. I mean, depending on how your mind works, I'm a fairly negative person. And I know people are amazed to hear that, but naturally my mind wants to go to negative thoughts. And so I work very hard to project that positivity and to create that positive mindset, because I know how my mind works and how I constantly have to stay on top of it. But for so many people, those micro ambushes hit us, and it's that little voice that tells you, you can't do this, or you're not good enough. Oh, you want to achieve that goal? Nah, you don't have the tools to do that. Why are you even going to start? So micro ambushes, maybe once a week, how we, drive through and overcome them. Second level is minor ambushes. And these are those things that come along that I like to describe as schedule disruptions. They're big enough to actually offset what you were planning on doing that day, that week, sometimes even up to a month. And oftentimes I describe them as, you're a one-car family and your car breaks down. That creates a pretty big impact on you and your family, having to figure out, how do we take care of this? How do we get to school? How do we get to work? How do we get around while our car is being worked on?
I can relate to that, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, and most people can. Most people out there are like, okay, check. I've had that level of ambush that comes along. But the biggest thing I tell people, if you fast forward a few years, you won't really remember that. Like if I said to you, hey, Dom, you remember when your car broke down and you had to borrow mine or I had to give you a ride or whatever it was? And you'd be like, yeah, I kind of remember. Yeah, I remember that. But it doesn't have the negative impact of the truly major ones. And the major life ambushes, we figured out that the average person will go through about 5 in a lifetime. And these are the ones that will forever leave a physical, mental, or emotional scar on you, or all three. And they are, you will always get that knot in the pit of your stomach when you think about it. It's just, it'll forever leave that scar. And it, on the lower levels, there are things like maybe a relationship breakup. Maybe you've been with someone for quite a while, obviously ramping that up into a divorce. It is a high level personal or business failure that you've had to go through. It could be a lawsuit. It could be bankruptcy. From there, it could be life-threatening illness or injury, life-threatening illness or injury to a loved one. It could be sexual trauma to you or a loved one. And it could be the unexpected loss of a loved one. And then one of the biggest impacts that I've seen is the unexpected loss of a child. These are major, major life ambushes. And what I've come to find is that whenever any of these things happen, whether it's a micro, a minor, or a major, people have the natural tendency to do what you and I have seen individuals do in firefights who are untrained. They hunker down, they kind of pray it would just go away, they get behind something, and they don't really do anything. They just kind of freeze in the moment. And people in life amazingly do the same thing when these things hit them. They are overwhelmed in the moment, especially in the major life ambushes. And they sit on the X. And what you and I learned and what saved my life, and I've watched it help so many other people, just like in a firefight, the faster you get off the X, the faster you're going to be able to deal with the problem and the faster you're going to be able to overcome it and move forward. And it's hard. It's counterintuitive for what's going on in your life, because even though, it's not real bombs or bullets that are going off around you like it would be in a real world firefight, your body and your mind and the stress levels are exactly the same, because you're dealing with such a major 100%. Incident in your life. And if we hooked you up to, an EKG and brain monitor and heart rate monitor and stress, whatever all these things are, next to me when I was on my firefight, they'd be almost identical depending on the major life ambush you're going through. So, we have to fight through fear, and we have to go through a process. The way you and I survived ambushes and getting off the X in a special operations career was 3 things that I tell people that you have to do. Number 1, you have to build an overcome mindset. You have to build this idea that I don't care what comes along, I'm going to move forward. I'm going to drive past it. It is not going to destroy me. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to be a victor. I'm going to drive forward. I don't care how long it takes. If I'm only crawling nanometer by nanometer, I'm still going to drive forward. So that's number 1. And we definitely built that into our culture, but I tell everybody you can build that mindset. Number 2 that enables that is preparation and training. So how do you take care of yourself? How do you build yourself? And that starts to get into my Pentagon of peak performance, how we train, how you lead yourself, how you take care of your body and your mind, who you surround yourself with. And then the last component is balance. Are you balanced in your life? So many people are way out of balance. And just like in martial arts, you have to have a good stance to be balanced, to absorb energy or flow and be able to move back. And if you're off balance, it doesn't take a lot of effort to knock somebody down.
What is balance?
So balance is not what everybody wants to think. It's like this. No, I put 20% to my family. Yes. I put 20%. And that's just not true. Life doesn't work that way. But what I see balance as is that we apply time and effort. We make a conscious effort to apply time and effort to the different areas of our life that are important to us. And you know, in my opinion, it's 5 key areas. So this is what I call the Pentagon of peak performance. So the foundational level is physical leadership. It is sleep, nutrition, and fitness. And the reason being, and what's amazing to me as we get older in life, we do the exact opposite of what we need to do. You know, the reality is you can probably get away with not working out quite as much as when you're younger because your body is so phenomenally tuned and can handle so much more. Although that's not an excuse. You should be working out. You should be taking care of your body 100%. From day one. You're
no
born.
Excuses.
Yeah, you're born in a Ferrari, man. You're born in a Lamborghini. As a good friend of mine, you're born as a jet fighter. And so many people in life, as we get older, just like a vehicle, if you don't use it, it rusts, it falls apart. You've got to use it. You've got to upkeep it. You've got to put good fuel in it. You got to wash it and take care of it and, you know, make sure it operates at optimum efficiency. And the older it gets, the more work it takes to keep it at that level. But it's the foundational level. And your ability to withstand stress, your ability to fight off disease, your ability to manage everything in your life, your ability to project energy and have energy management, which is one of the biggest things we need in this day and age.
100%.
It's all built on that
point.
Physical leadership. And I tell people, I meet people who don't put time into that. They have a terrible diet. They I love this myth that's existing in this world right now that I can get by on, 4 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
You can't, well, I will say this. There are a few, and when I talk about a few, genetic freaks out there that just something in them enables them to be optimal at that level. But the average person needs 6 to 7 hours a night to be optimal for your body to recover. And then obviously good nutrition. And they don't do those things. And then I'm like, so let me get this straight. You're focused on taking care of your family. You're focused on building your business. You're focused on wanting to be able to take vacations, but you have no physical leadership. So all of that's going to be for naught if you have a heart attack, if you get diabetes, if you have some unexpected illness or some major illness comes along.
100%, dude. I cannot agree with you more. It's the investment that people ignore until it's too late. And I said it the other day, I was like, people don't change until they make it personal. Oh, hey, you have a health issue now. Oh, now I need to change. Get ahead of that power curve. So I think you're spot on with setting that foundation. Well,
and it's what you and I learned also. And it's amazing. And this is why it's so important. The intangible lessons you learn in the military, we learn to be proactive instead of reactive, and people need to be that way in life. So balance falls into that. So you talk about preparation and balance. It's recognizing the signs. So many people don't understand they have a health issue until they go to the doctor, but we have so many tools in this day and age. You should be looking at your weight. You could buy a blood pressure machine. You should know on average what your blood pressure is. You should know, hey man, if I'm grossly obese, I'm setting myself up for a whole lot of health problems. So being proactive and no different in an ambush, in a real world enemy ambush, we know the indicators. And what's so funny is I talk to people in life. So often I meet people that go, oh my God, I had this major life ambush and I never saw it coming. And I'm like, really? I was like, let's peel back that onion. Right. It's very rare that a life ambush happens that we never saw coming. There are instances, obviously, there are certain unexpected illnesses that can come along that we never saw coming. Definitely accidents, sexual trauma, those things we may never see coming. But for the most part, most things, there are indicators, there are signs, and we either chose to ignore them, or we just didn't see them. We were ignorant in the moment and we didn't see them, but then they make sense afterwards.
So I want to go back into the 5 peak performance, the whole 5-pointed Pentagon. But the ambush, and you say you doubt that people weren't able to see it coming. Is there anything that you focus on, or is anything that you do to help exercise the ability to see these things? Like, to me, it's awareness. To me, it's a level of awareness.
Correct.
So is there anything specific that either you do or you think of or teach that helps people find these precursors? Because to me, I relate it to a bar fight. Most people are like, oh, I never saw it coming. I'm like, hey, man, That guy was staring at you 30 minutes ago
Yeah.
before you even realized what was happening. You just didn't know it was going to happen. You couldn't see the precursor.
Yep.
I can see a fight unfold from a mile away at this point because I've got the training to find these precursors. What are you doing to kind of pick up on this stuff?
Yeah, it's the same way. It's the awareness, make sure you're aware of your surroundings, be proactive in what you do. So if you're educating the 5 areas of the Pentagon are physical leadership, mental leadership. So educating yourself, mental leadership is educating yourself, gaining new experiences, pushing outside of your comfort zone. Emotional leadership is being in control of your emotions, projecting positivity, which is my weakest area, I'll tell you. The fourth one is social leadership. Who do you surround yourself with? Investing in the teams that are most important to you, your friends and family. Your work relationships, equally important, but at the end of the day, it's your friends and family that you're going to have with you in the end. And they're the most critical people you need when you go through major life ambushes. And the last one, spiritual leadership.
Awesome.
How do we get outside of ourselves? And how do we look for that higher level that, it's not just about us, man. There's a whole world out there and a whole lot of people that are hurting. That perspective, no bad days mindset. So
I got it right in front of me, by the way. And if you guys don't know, you've got to go check out Jason's flow and what he's doing and what he's putting out there. So I'm over here taking notes because I love this stuff. And I know with your experience and what you've done, being able to translate that into something that's helping people on a daily basis, you're offering a whole system, essentially, or whatever you want to call it, to be able to lead people to better their lives each and every day with those 5 points. And I think it's absolutely on point. The categories couldn't be more on point. I'm relating to a lot of what you're saying to what I do, so it's really cool to hear you say that. And if people want to go find out that stuff, I just want to make sure I don't forget to say it. So where can they go to find what you're putting out there for people?
So you can go to jasonredman.com is my website. And then if you click on, and we're revamping things right now, but if you click on like coaching, it's going to take you, or my store, it's going to take you to getoffx.com. And getoffx.com is actually where my store is, where some of my products are. We created a course called 72 Hours to Peak Performance. And it's about an hour online video course that, it requires some deep thinking. And I'll tell you, some people out there, one of the biggest problems with getting off the X for anyone is coming to accept reality.
Yep.
And some people don't want to accept reality. I'll be honest, I made some definite failures as a leader early in my career. And it took a while to come to grips with I wasn't the person who I thought I was. I had a lot of flaws. I still have a lot of flaws, but I'm aware of those flaws now and I work on them. And I'm not perfect. No one is, but I recognize them. And, right off the bat, when I meet people who aren't willing to look at their weaknesses or they're not willing to confront the problems they have, like I already talked about, emotional leadership's my biggest hurdle that I have to overcome. And I have to watch it like a hawk, man. I can bubble up quick. And if I'm not fully aware of the indicators, I can place myself in a situation I don't want to be in or damage my credibility as a leader because I blew up over something stupid because I wasn't watching myself and managing myself. So that course is 72 Hours to Peak Performance. So it talks about, are you in a life ambush? Because so many people are in a life ambush. Man, they've been stuck on the X for years. They're stuck on the X in their job. They're stuck on the X in their relationship. They're stuck on the X in their fitness. They're stuck on the X in their head. And they've just constantly made excuses and never come to grips. They've just walked around in denial and accepted, well, this is just the way my life is. My life just sucks. Well, it doesn't have to, man. You have a choice. You can make changes. And so it walks you through one, what is a life ambush, and are you in one? And then 2, it walks you through a methodology we created called the REACT methodology. And the REACT methodology is exactly that. R stands for recognize. You've got to recognize that you're in a life ambush, you're stuck in a situation, you are in a crisis. And are you doing what so many people do? Are you in denial, which so many people are? Are you trying to ignore what's going on? Are you trying to just hope it'll go away by itself, which I got to let you know it never will. It ain't just going to fix itself. Life doesn't work that way. Are you avoiding people because of that ambush? I mean, that's a big indicator that you're in a crisis. We tend to push people away, especially people that want to talk to us about the problems we're having. And if we're not ready to confront them, we avoid them. And this can be our family members. And then the last one, and this is where you see it happen a lot, are we self-medicating? People want to numb the pain of a crisis, and they do it through alcohol, they do it through risky behavior. Some people do it through extreme behavior. These are all indicators that you are not recognizing what you're going through. So, the first step in my course is, are you in a life ambush? And you got to articulate it, man. You got to own it. Yes, I am, and this is what's happening.
Man, it's so crazy. What you just said about self-medicating and numbing it to not confront the reality, it's crazy, and I'm bringing this up now, but that's been a common thread on just about every episode we've done. Somebody's brought up something to the fact of like recognizing the harm in that. So it's good that you're bringing it up again, but it just goes to show you how much of a problem it is.
And so many people do it. I mean, we've become this society of, if there's a problem, you wonder why there's an opioid epidemic. I mean, if somebody has a little, especially in the wounded warrior community, it is rampant. Like the VA medical system, they've done a lot of good things, but one of the biggest things they've done to negative things is for our wounded warriors. They have some sort of bump or pain that probably there could be some non-pharmacological solution to it. Instead, it's just like, oh, we'll give you some more pain meds.
It's the easy button for them.
And we have so many guys that are addicted now to opioids and can't get off it. And they get comfortable sitting on the X. And so many people out there do that. They get comfortable sitting on the X. They buy into this victim mindset, and they want to continue. They don't want to address the problem. Because addressing the problem means, A, I have to admit there's a problem, and B, the road off the X is going to suck. And most people, so that's number one, recognize. Number two, you've got to evaluate what do you have at your disposal. So step one, we recognize, and now we know, okay, I've got a problem. I'm in a crisis. I'm dealing with this life ambush. So what do I have at my disposal now? What do I have to bring to bear to deal with the problem? So it may be you need to go talk to your chaplain. You need to go talk to a counselor. Who are your friends and family that you can confide in and say, okay, hey, listen, I've got a problem and I need your help. It may be your employer, you've got to go to and say, I'm really going through a major crisis right now. So, but you've got to own it. You've got to come up. And then what are the other assets? You may need an attorney. You may need a doctor. You may need some things to bring to bear. So you've got to really look at what are all the assets that I have. No different when we were in any kind of ambush or firefight, we looked at what are all the assets we have to bear. I have additional fire teams. I have a heavy weapons team. I have a AC-130 gunship, I have fast movers, I have, helicopter gunships, whatever it is. I have a medevac platform, I have drones. Doesn't matter. Those are all the assets I have to bring to bear.
I'm going to bring up a point on that before you go to 3, because the resources aspect, you just triggered something in my mind, because you said it's just like when we go out, we know we have these resources to pull from and these assets to pull from. But something that I just made the recognition on is when we recognize what we have going on, I think what's important for us thinking proactively, going back to what you were saying before, is that we go into the fight knowing what our assets are. We go into the ambush knowing what our assets are. And I think if people can connect that in their own life, I always go back to what's our worst case scenario if we risk it all. If I walked out this door right now and gave up everything, what would be my worst case scenario? I'd still have a wife to go home to. I still have kids. I still have a father that loves me. I still have family members and good friends that I can lean on and talk to. So if I arm myself with my resources, even in my own life, it's going to allow me to walk through those ambushes knowing that I can fall back on those assets ASAP. I just wanted to connect that because I thought that was a cool thing that you just did that I made the recognition on. So even if you're listening to this, if you can pull your assets close to you now, when the ambush does happen, it's like it doesn't take much thought to pick up the phone instead of thinking, wait a minute, who can rely on? You should know that already. And I think that that's a great just connection that I thought of.
Absolutely. Once again, being proactive versus
100%.
reactive.
And that's
so thinking about those
Yep.
things. And in some ways, somebody once asked me, they said, when we were talking about this, they said, oh, so, what you're saying is I should think ahead, God forbid if I lost a child. And I said, yeah, that's a pretty extreme situation. I don't think as a parent I would ever like try and think through what would happen if I lost a child. But I do think about, extreme situations. How will I deal with this? And how will I make sure no matter what, I'm going to figure out how to drive forward?
I'd lean on God a lot.
Oh,
with my whole heart, man. Because I have kids, you have kids. And it's like for whatever reason, that's been coming up a little bit this morning about that extreme scenario. And it's like, we don't want to go so far down the road that it consumes us. But there is that confrontation of like, look, this is life. Life happens. Yep. And it's unknown what's going to happen. So just setting our minds up proactively to be like, it could happen, which is why I do believe faith is so important, because there's some things that are out of our control.
Yep.
And we have to have trust in that.
Yep.
But that's cool, man. So I've got recognize and then knowing your resources.
Yep. Recognize, evaluate. E is evaluate. A is assess your options and outcomes. So now that you know what your assets are that you can bring to bear on this problem, now we got to start looking at, okay, what is option A and what would be the outcome for option A? What is option B and what would be the outcome for option B? And this is where it starts to get a little difficult, because oftentimes, especially if you've been in a life ambush for a while, sometimes it's going to get harder before it gets easier. And people have a natural tendency, because they've been in it and it's painful. Nobody wants to be in it. We're in pain. We're dealing with a crisis. Oftentimes people want to click the easy button. I want to take this first route. That's going to be the easiest. And oftentimes what happens is we actually put ourselves in a worse situation. And now we got to figure out how to get out of that situation, because we took the easy button just to quickly get off the X. Exactly. Instead of, in a firefight, I give the example of, you move out of a position where you're taking a little bit of fire, but you don't even realize it because you move so quick. You actually moved in a position, now you're taking more fire. So either A, have to go back to the first position, or now you got to figure out where else you go. And life's no different. We sometimes will move into a worse position because we haven't thought through the options and outcomes. So that's A. 4 is you've gone through, we know we've recognized, we've evaluated our assets, we've analyzed what our options and outcomes are. And now we've got to choose and communicate where we're going. The interesting thing about any life ambush is almost never are you in a life ambush by yourself. When you are in any kind, especially major life ambushes, not the micro ones, but for a major life ambush, your family's pulled onto the X with you. Yep. Your friends are pulled onto the X with 100%. You. Your coworkers, if it's a business ambush, they're on the X with you. And in any situation like that, there is a period of uncertainty. There's a period of people are in pain. They're trying to figure out the chaos, and they are looking for someone to provide guidance. And if you, as a leader and the central figure, whether you're a father, whether you are a boss, someone has to step up and make a decision. And the longer you sit there, the X is kind of like quicksand. The longer you sit in an ambush, the more it pulls you down, and they're getting pulled down with you. So you've got to make a choice. And you and I, we were joking about this morning, no different in fitness. Movement is life. The longer you sit there, the harder it's going to be to move. By constantly moving, we stay fluid, and it's no different in this. So it's better. Action is always better than inaction. So even if you're still struggling and maybe you don't know, you've known your assets, but you're not sure which option, just pick one, man, and go and communicate it to your team. Because it's at that point that you're going to give people something that everybody's looking for, and it's a little bit of hope. It's like, oh my God, that guy's in charge. He just made a decision. Let's go. Let's get out of this crappy situation. And with your family, that's so critical. So choose and communicate. The other great thing about communicating is you now have voiced what you're going to do. And this now gives, it forces you to have a little accountability. A lot of people will go through, they'll recognize, they'll evaluate, and they'll assess. But then they may make a choice, but they don't communicate it yet because they haven't bought it in their mind yet. But the problem is when it's inside you, nobody else knows. And there's no accountability. There's no expectations. So until you communicate it, now it adds a little fuel to the fire to execute. And that is the last one, T. You've got to take action. You've got to execute. You've gone through all these steps. So many people sit there forever waiting for the perfect moment, and it's never going to come. You will sit there and wither and die waiting for the perfect moment. So just, follow the path, pick the best option and outcome you can, communicate it to the people around you or at least one other person for that accountability purpose, and then go.
That goes back to my favorite quote of all time by George Patton, and that's a good violent plan executed right now is better than a perfect plan executed a week from now.
Yep.
And it just goes along with everything. It's never going to be perfect. It doesn't exist.
Yep.
So when we're getting ready to go on target or go to the X or whatever the case is like we have a good plan and we're going to go be very violent about it. And that's the thing. It's like you've got to execute. You got to move forward. You got to pick a direction because you're going to learn and adapt immediately instead of waiting to try to figure out for the perfect time that doesn't exist. One thing I wanted to ask you was, you've got experience watching people go through this process. Why do you think people, and what do you think the biggest thing, the reason is stay on the X? Why do they stay on the X? And what do you think the biggest reason is that they do stay on the X?
So the biggest reason that I've seen, and I'm guilty of it, is as human beings, we have a natural tendency to look back at what we've lost. And we want to focus on what we've lost. We want back whatever it is. Anytime we have a major life ambush, we've lost something. We've lost our innocence. We've lost our status in life. We've lost money. Whatever it is. And it's just human nature that we want to focus on the past. But the reality is you can't ever change it. You can never go back and change the past. All you can do is shape the future. And you need to stop wasting time looking back, because until you turn around and start looking at how to move forward, you are going to be stuck. And so many people waste so much time. They waste so much time on what they've lost. And then the other biggest thing that keeps people stuck on the X is they look for someone or something to blame. And they spend so much time and energy focused on whatever thing or whatever person put them there. Yep. And the reality is it doesn't matter.
Nope.
It doesn't matter. We give an example in my new book about someone whose family member is murdered. And they place so much time and effort into the trial and that person being convicted. And when they finally get to the court date and the conviction, and that person who murdered their family member is convicted, and even if they get the death sentence, it still doesn't bring back what they lost.
Yep.
And they end up, and if they haven't dealt with the loss itself and how to move forward off the X, they actually just sat on the X the whole time, focused on that blame pattern, and they never really moved off it. And I know you and we've lost teammates. I've watched family members that do this. They won't allow themselves to move forward. They convince themselves, they feel guilty for enjoying life when that family member is no longer here. And all those things are lies we tell ourselves. And those are all the things that'll pin you to the X. And we're all guilty. I'm guilty. I've done it to myself. So I've been through 3 major life ambushes. It's something I realized in my book. I really analyzed. Because one, I absolutely launched from. I blew off the X like a rocket. And that was my injuries. And it made me really go, gosh, why did I do so well in that one? And the other 2 that occurred, I kind of sat on the X for a while. And I realized it was because when I was injured, God works in amazing ways. So the very first life ambush I went through was a leadership failure within the SEAL teams. I was a brand new officer, and this gets into a pretty long, deep story that my book, The Trident, follows this entire journey. It is about my failure as a young leader and coming to understand what it is to lead, and slowly over about a 2.5-year period, earning back the trust and credibility and respect of my teammates to allow them or to allow me to lead them. And it is the hardest road I have ever walked, because I went from, at one point in my career, the absolute low point of standing in front of my commanding officer, and several people said, hey, take his Trident. He's made bad choices. He's dangerous. The lowest point I've ever been in my life. I was actually suicidal. To coming back and understanding, this is where the whole 3 rules of leadership, the Pentagon of peak performance, I hadn't articulated then, but I understood it. And it was that road that culminated at the end of that road with my injuries on the battlefield. I had redeemed myself. I had come back. I figured out what it was to lead, and I was incredibly well balanced when that injury occurred. So I launched from that one. The leadership failure, I was not. It took me, give or take, about 6 months to get off that X, to go through this crazy process of stop blaming people, because I blamed everyone. I was the victim. I was thrown under the bus. I made the right decisions. It was a witch hunt, all the other crap, all the lies that we tell ourselves. And it wasn't until finally this long journey of coming to figure out, hey man, there's only one person to blame for the situation you're in, this guy.
Yep.
And it was only through that process, and I, just learning a lot about myself, recognizing my strengths, my weaknesses, my flaws, and figuring all that out. That enabled me to launch. And then the third life ambush I've been through was a business lawsuit that we got into after I'd been out of the military, and got into a situation with some friends, and I was kind of a new businessman, and we didn't have a contract, and unfortunately opinions differed, the way things unfolded differed, egos kind of clashed, and it all devolved because it turned into a he said, she said situation that devolved into a lawsuit. And I was not taking as good care of myself in that moment, because I got into the business world and bought into the lies that so many of us do. Let me focus on my business. It was after I got out of the military. I had been injured, so I wasn't building my foundational level of physical leadership. I'd let myself go. When all of that happened, I was in denial. I was self-medicating with a lot of alcohol, all these things that kept me pinned to the X for a while, until finally I stopped focusing on the things that I couldn't control, and I focused on the things that I control, and the things that were important to me, my family and the people around me, and how I could better take care of myself. And that was the third time in my life I had to make this switch and start once again following.
I've fought that since being out of the military, like to a T of what you're saying. And we get out, we're like, okay, well, I have to run a business now, and I've got to make revenue. I've got to take care of people. There's all these numbers flying. Hey, there's so many people knocking at your door that want relationships and want to invest. And there's so much stimulus and distractions out there. And we tend to buy into some of those lies. We're like, oh, well, these guys are successful, so I need to be following the same path in order to do that. When you start peeling the layers back, like I was talking to you about before, you start finding out, like, wait a minute, these guys have horrible relationships with their children. And these guys are out of shape. And they're not in the best condition that they should be. And some of these guys aren't sleeping. And look, I get it. I mean, I've worked my ass off for the last 7 years of my life. And I've done all those things in one way or another. But it's constantly reforging what the best version of ourselves is for us in the future. And I tell guys around me all the time that I care about, don't ever deviate from what you know your priorities should be. You've got to fight for that every single day. And you know what? Some things are going to suffer because of it, but I would rather that be money than my kids.
Yep.
I'd rather that be the time with some of my business partners than my wife. And it's so hard to understand that at times because you're doing it for them. But I'll never forget, man, I came home one day after being on the road for, a month and a half straight. And I looked my wife in the eye and I'm like, she's like, you haven't been home, things were tight in the house. And I said, look, yeah, but I'm doing this for you guys. So, it's good. I'm going. This is all about you guys. And I remember she looked at me in the eyes and she's like, that's great, but what's it all worth if you're not here? And I remember it hit me like a friggin' sack of bricks. Like, whoa, okay, I got to reevaluate the effort that I'm putting into that and the effort that I'm putting into my relationship in life. So for anybody listening to this, it's the priorities is like not deviating that. It's a tough balance because especially in our culture, there's all kinds of lies out there trying to pull you to be successful and all these other titles and personas that people think they need to become. And that's what success is. And I think defining that is super important as well. Defining who we are and what we're becoming is so important. And, it's interesting. Those three aspects is like, I knew about one or two of those, but it's interesting to hear you kind of articulate some of the other ambushes that you've been through, and then knowing that you were set up for success in the first one. And then the other one's kind of not being a setup for success. And we always talk about, I have a program, Armor Up, armoring up literally to layer that mentally, physically, spiritually. So if we do get hit, we're ready to handle it. We're ready to handle it mentally. We're ready to handle a physical altercation in our lives because we have been preparing. And I think it's that proactive mindset that it goes back to, hearing you talk about that again. And the first ambush that you talked about, I wanted to get into that, and I wanted you to get into that story. And I know you've told it, but I really want our listeners to hear what you had to go through and kind of that starting your journey. I'm sitting here staring at this letter because of how powerful it is and what came out of that for you and why it took you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually the second.
It's
actually the second. Yeah, the leadership failure was the first. And climbing out of that hole really prepared me for the second. So, it was about a 2.5 year period in between the leadership failure and that growth and coming to understand what it is to be a leader and really becoming balanced. I didn't know it at the time, but I was applying the 3 rules of leadership: lead yourself, lead others, lead always. And I was applying the principles of the Pentagon at that time in my life at a very high level, so that by the time I was injured, and for those, I'll give you a snapshot. So basically, operating in the Anbar province of Iraq in the summer of 2007, an incredibly volatile time, 2006 and 2007 Iraq, we saw some of the heavier fighting. And my team, we were fortunate enough to be working almost every night and very dynamic, a lot of firefights, and just everything we ever trained to do kind of occurred on that deployment. And having turned my career around, it was awesome. I was really excited. I gotten everything back on track. I was actually screening to go to our next level team. And then we were 1 week from going home, and we got word that there was a specific, a leader, a guy we had been hunting all deployment that was going to be in a specific time and location. So we launched on that mission. And long story short, walked into a very well executed ambush. My team and I were hit right off the bat. We estimate about 15 guys, 2 PKM machine guns at a distance of about 50 feet. And medic was initially hit, took a round right through the lower leg, right below his knee, severed both bones. He was dropped and pinned. One of our other guys ran forward and grabbed him. They were in some vegetation, and behind us was nothing but, thousands of yards of empty Iraqi desert. And laying down fire, the only cover we had was kind of a large, like John Deere tractor tire. And guys fell back to that. I was still trying to lay down some fire when I had both machine guns turned on me. Got stitched across body armor, took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which I thought took my arm off. Took rounds off my helmet, left night vision tube shot off, rounds off my weapon. Quickly realized not a good place to be, to put it mildly, and turned around to try and move back to the tire where the other guys were, and that was when I caught a round in the face. It hit me from behind, kind of at an angle. It caught me right in front of my right ear. It traveled through my face, exited the right side of my nose, and PKM round. So it took out my entire cheekbone. What was left of my cheekbone broke and kicked out to the right. It blew out my orbital floor. It broke all the bones above my eye. It shattered the head of my jaw, shattered my jaw down to my chin. My eye kind of fell into this newfound hole in my face, and it knocked me out. So needless to say, when I came to, I was totally pinned down. There was literally this firefight that was occurring directly over me. I was laying on my back, and I was watching tracer fire travel over me. I was in between my guys and the enemy, and it's an interesting place to be, because I very quickly realized that there was nothing I could do. That the only thing I could do was lay there and be patient and wait for my team members to win the fight. But I somehow had confidence that they would do that they had the ability to do that I just had to wait. And that's a hard thing sometimes.
Yeah.
And interestingly, in life ambushes, this is where it's so critical, surrounding yourself with the right people, that you can rely on people, because there are going to be times that you're going to get in a situation that it's beyond your control to get out of.
Back to that point.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to be patient, knowing that they can help you and that they're there for you. But without making a situation worse. I could have made that situation worse if, I started screaming my head off and like, hey, come get me right now. I would have put their lives at risk. Two, if I had tried to get up and move, in the middle of this fierce fire, I would have gotten shot more. I mean, hell, I got shot more on the ground. But thankfully, for some reason in the firefight, I took my helmet off. So my helmet actually took a round through it as it was sitting next to me. And I took a round off my right side plate as I was laying there. But thankfully, I didn't take any actual bullets to the body laying on the ground. But long story short, my team did an amazing job. My team leader in a Lowland fire ran forward and got me back. He got a tourniquet on my arm. He saved my life. The guys fought back. We called in a fire mission, which ended up being the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war. We dropped rounds virtually right on top of ourselves. Managed to take the enemy out and push them back, and then we brought in the medevac helicopter. So they saved my life in Baghdad. I lost a lot of blood. I think I needed about 8 units over a day and a half between Baghdad to Balad, and then Balad, they got me to Germany. And they got to Bethesda Naval Hospital and really kind of struggled with what had happened. I'll be honest. I was a little bit on the X. And a lot of times I tell people, ambushes sometimes happen in 2 stages. There's an initial ambush, and then you kind of fall into the second ambush, and life ambushes are that way too. The initial ambush was actually the enemy ambush. The second ambush was the confronting the reality of what had happened. And I'll be honest, in the beginning, that was really hard. I was like, man, I just walked like the hardest road I've ever walked in my life to build myself back up and earn back the trust of my teammates and to be able to lead, and finally got my career on track. And I was 1 week from going home, and now I've got my face blown out. I hadn't seen myself in a mirror. I was afraid to look at myself in a mirror. I was trached. I was wired shot. I had a stomach tube. The doctors were talking about amputating my arm. I was too weak to even get out of bed from the blood loss. So pretty hard reality to wake up in this secondary ambush. And then the second thing, I assumed, I think we all think that, hey, we have these injuries and we think that, hey, in 3-4 months you can heal me up and I'm out of here. And I remember I asked the doctor at one point, I wrote to the doctor, I said, how long is this going to take? A few months? And she was like stunned, and like, a few months? She was like, it's going to take years to put you back together. And that was a pretty big shock to think, years? Man, I don't have years. I got to get back to the fight, man. I got things to do. And so that was tough. So I was kind of dealing with all that for a couple of days. And a couple of people came into my room, and short conversation. My wife had left the room probably for about the first time and went to go get a cup of coffee. I mean, she had lived, literally slept in a chair next to my bed for the first 4 or 5 days. And these individuals were in my room, and I started to drift off, but I was in that subconscious state that all of us get into, where you can still hear the TV, you can hear conversation, but you're just not actively engaged. It's at, that level before you actually drift off into sleep. And they started to have a conversation next to my bed, and it was about, well, what a shame, what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war, and they come back broken and battered, and they'll never be the same. And I get it. A lot of people are like, oh my God, that's what assholes.
Right.
But if you've never been to a military combat hospital during a war, it is a hard place to be. You see some horrific injuries in those hallways. You see young kids walking around with burns and missing limbs, and it is a very emotional experience. So I don't fault them. You know, they had this conversation, and to be honest, it was a launch point. It really was for me, because when they left, I was digesting what they had said. And this is where I tell everybody, you have a choice in life. You know, you have a choice when bad things happen to you to be a victim and to lay there and feel sorry for yourself and try and look at every external thing that you can blame and say, oh, woe is me. You know, I had these bad things happen and life's unfair and I'm just going to sit here and stew in it and never move forward and be the victim forever, which a lot of people do.
Yep.
Or you can be a victor and you can say, I don't care what happened. It doesn't really matter. I can't control anything that's happened in the past. All I can do is drive forward. And that's what I thought about. And in that moment, I was like, you know what, man, I'm struggling not to feel sorry for myself. For damn sure, you're not going to come in my room and feel sorry for me. And so when my wife came back, I said, hey, let me have my paper. And I wrote out this sign. And it basically, you know, you read it at the beginning. Karma, come here.
Good boy.
All right.
Doing his job.
Lay down. Hey, you're good. Thank you.
He's got a service dog here with him, which is awesome.
We had somebody come to the door and he alerted us. All right, good job. But
it's a good dog.
Okay. But I wrote out that sign and really there was no. It wasn't something that I thought about for I'll be honest, I don't even think I thought about it for more than 5 minutes. It wasn't something I thought about for days and was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It literally was a stream of consciousness in the moment. I made a decision and said, I will not be a victim. I will be a victor. I will choose positivity over negativity. And I don't know what the future holds for me, but I tell you what, I'm not going to sit on this X and feel sorry for myself. And that's how the sign came to be. And I wrote it out and I told my wife, you know, no one is allowed to come into my room again without reading this. And we put it on the door. And a few days later, a New York firefighter, amazing guy I became friends with, who passed away last year, 2 years ago now, unfortunately. He had lost both sons on 9/11. He was a Marine, and I think he started coming to the hospital just to kind of heal his broken soul. And just an amazing guy, a legend in the New York Fire Department. We hit it off. He took a picture of the sign, wrote a blog of it, and it went viral. And everybody, even to this day, talks about, oh my God, you're the guy that wrote the sign on the door. But the reality is, the sign on the door is merely a capture of an overcome mindset. That's all it is. And I just happen to write it down. That's it. You know, You have that mindset. Everybody in life has the ability to have that mindset. You just have to choose it. And one of the greatest thing about choosing that mindset comes back to what you and I have been talking about all morning, is how do you leave the world a better place than you showed up in it? How can you make an impact on at least one person? And that's the thing. With choosing positivity over negativity, you never know the impact it's going to have on somebody else out there.
100%.
That sign has gone on to inspire millions of people now. I've had individuals that have suffered grievous accidents write me and say, man, I put your sign on my door. I've had a lot of people that have gone through cancer that have put it on their door. Secretary Robert Gates wrote about it in his book. First Lady Michelle Obama wrote about it twice in her book. And I think the coolest thing is, I didn't keep it. I didn't feel like it was mine. I felt like, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the Wounded Warriors. And we had it framed, and it now hangs in the Wounded Ward at Bethesda or Walter Reed National Medical Center now.
That's cool.
And the guys and gals would rub it. They would go by it before they went to surgery, and they would rub it for luck. So you never know the impact that you're going to have when you're in this, oh my God, awesome, my life sucks moment, and you choose positivity. It's not going to be easy. It's not like you're going to have this epiphany where you're like, oh, I'm in this really hard moment, and you know what, I'm going to choose positivity, and all of a sudden it's going to be rainbows and unicorns. It's still going to suck.
Yep.
But the more you choose that positivity, the more you will be able to drive forward, and the more you'll actually bring other people with you.
Yep, and make an impact on other people as well. Is like, that's the thing that we can't always see. And just being a Christian and knowing that serving other people through that pain and suffering is part of our lifestyle is that once you accept and understand that part of your pain is that you might not see it and it might not make sense, but just the impact that your sign has had on so many people to help them shift their mindset. You have no idea. You'll never have any idea the impact that you're having. You just won't.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not really up to us to understand. You know, that's why I always talk about some of the same things. Like it fires me up so much to hear you talk about this because it's just helps continue to validate like what has happened to us in the past. There's nothing that we can do about it. Zero. We have zero control. It's gone. And I'm working with a guy right now that's one of the leading neuroscientists in the world. And he always talks about you can either try to polish the past or create the future. And there's two types of attitudes, and people get stuck in the polish the past. I'm going to try to polish the past. And I think that that's where part of where people get stuck on the X is they're continuing to try to fix and polish their experiences, and they don't have the ability to see that the only thing that they have control of is creating the future.
Yep.
So I think that's a really powerful thing. So talk about the Will to Fight story. I mean, that is pretty incredible, bro. And I know a part of it, but I always think it's impactful to hear it again, and especially for other people that are listening to what you've been through. You know, I often visualize, especially when I was going on target. I mean, every time I would leave, I would always think to myself, okay, if I get hit, if I get shot, if I get blown up, like I'm just going to keep moving and doing everything that I possibly can in my power to move forward. And just keep that will to fight engaged no matter what. And you're not going to be able to take it away from me. And being in a situation where you got knocked out, laying on your back, staring at a tracer fire, I heard you say patience because you knew. And then it went back to the resources and the assets that you have in your life, relying on those guys and having a little bit of confidence and faith in those guys coming to you at the time that you needed them the most. And I won't forget what you said in this podcast because I think that's so powerful to relate that to our lives, to say, who are my assets? How can I be proactive with building my assets, rely on my assets, invest into my resources and assets? So when I do get smacked in the face, to have faith and patience in the people that are around me. And sometimes that takes time, you know, and I'm sure that those seconds probably felt like hours.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, days. I mean, it was about a 35-minute firefight, and it seemed like it lasted forever.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, bro. And the one thing I wanted to ask you, there's a couple more questions I have for you. And I always ask this to everybody that comes on, is honor. And I always feel like honor is a huge part of my fuel that gets my ass out of bed every single morning, put my feet on the ground. What does honor mean to you?
Honor means staying true to who you are and what you believe in. You know, I think honor and integrity go hand in hand. And recognizing that we are flawed. I tell you, one of the big things that I've struggled with since I got out, and it's something that there's so much, you had a singularity of focus in the military, especially with what we did. And that was, it allowed you to not get outside of those lanes. Whereas in the civilian world, I mean, when I got out, I was trying to do everything. I was running a nonprofit. I was trying to speak. I was trying to take care of my family. I was trying to do it all. And I realized there's only so much time. So I realized, man, I'm starting to hurt relationships because, A, I can't do everything, and I think I can do everything.
I still have that problem.
Yeah, me too. But I'm trying to get better about, because for me, it does. That is a part of honor. Like I, you know, and thinking I can do everything, I want to tell people, yeah, absolutely, I can help you. But I'm beginning to recognize I can't help everybody. So it's hard sometimes, but I also don't want to be that guy that just ignores people. So, I mean, to be able to say, hey, listen, man, I'm really sorry you're going through whatever you're going through, or I'm really sorry you're reaching out to me, but I just don't have the bandwidth to help you right now. You know, and I'm sorry if that creates a negative impact in your life, but I'd much rather tell you that than, you know, than damage my honor by saying, hey, I can help you, but then I can't follow through with it. So that's kind of one of the big things that I'm focusing on now. So it's staying true to yourself and what you believe in. and then following through and making sure you're managing your time and what you're able to do with reality.
Awesome. So honor has taken so many different shapes, but I think it sets the base foundation of how we respond to life. I always talk about honor sets the foundation of like, what do I honor? If I don't know what I honor in life, how am I going to understand what's most valuable in order to make my decisions and principles based off of that? Everything I do has to filter through honor. If I honor something, then that I have to go, is the action that I'm taking honoring what I actually appreciate and love in my life? And I believe that if you do that more and more and you make that a habit, it goes back to everything that we're talking about here. Can we recognize where we're at? Is it honoring who we love? And, having the resources and assets around you. Like, I honor everybody that I get, like having you here today. It's an honor to have you in the building. I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. So everybody that's around me, we're investing in each other today to try to, make a difference, and even in each other's lives. So I think that's huge. And that leads me to my last thing. And I know, I hope we can do another podcast, brother, because it's been awesome having you here. And I know you're running tight on time. But the last thing I want to ask you is faith. Do you believe in God?
Yeah, absolutely. And I am, it's funny. I speak in churches at times, and what I speak about, which I think sometimes makes some pastors cringe, is faith, and that it's okay sometimes to waver in your faith. I grew up in an incredibly strong Christian home, but growing up, it was just I have blind faith. It just was what it was. We grew up and we were in the church, and I grew up with the Bible, and I just accepted that it was what it is. But as you get older, now you start to become a man and you get out into the world, or you become an adult and you get out into the world, and you have to, you start to analyze and you start to look at, what is real and what is not. What do you believe and what do you not believe? And that was something as I went down this road. So I think I drifted away for a while. The SEAL teams are very hard. The military in general, I think, is a hard environment to be a strong Christian. And wait a minute, let me rephrase that. It's a strong place if you're weak-minded. And I was weak-minded. I went through a period of time where I would say I was a closet Christian. And interestingly enough, it wasn't until the night I was severely wounded, this was the final component of that firefight. So in that firefight, like I said, it was about 35 minutes. So now I don't know how long I lay there before my team leader managed to get forward in the lull and fire and pull me back and get a tourniquet on my arm. But I do know that however long that period was, I was losing a lot of blood. And I was going through the process of dying. I was going into shock, and we learn enough trauma medicine to understand, hey, the machine is malfunctioning and shutting down. And I was going through that whole process, and I was kind of in the stages of it was hard to breathe. I literally felt like I had a 10,000 pound weight on my chest. And every time I felt like I was running full out sprints and I just couldn't catch my breath. And I couldn't move anymore. My right arm was fine. And I remember trying to move my right hand and I couldn't really feel it. And I was like, this is it, bro. You're checking out. This is how you're going out. And that's a hard moment. Because I'll be honest, I started to, they say your life flashes before your eyes, and a little bit mine did. And what happened is I had a lot of regrets. I thought about a lot of things that I had not done that I wish I had done, more time spent with family. I thought a lot about things that I had done that I wish I hadn't done. And I really thought about my family, and that's all that mattered. And that's, today, that is the most important thing to me. I don't care what else happens. I don't need things. Things are nice, but, my family is my most important thing. And that, at the end, that's all I thought about. I thought about, man, I wish I could have just 30 more seconds to tell my wife and my kids that I love them. And, and in that moment, like the little voice was like, hey, there's a big, all powerful being up above, you could call out to him. And I did. I said, Lord, I need strength to go home. I can't, I got nothing. I need your strength. I want to go home. I want to see my wife and kids again. And instantly I had energy. Instantly. I mean, to this day, I can't explain it. I call it a little bit of a miracle because I don't know the timeline, but I do know that I went from a point where I was struggling to breathe, I was struggling to focus, to however much longer it was from that point to the medevac helicopter came in. It landed about 75 yards from me. And my team leader started to drag me, which was incredibly painful. So I was just like, dude, help me up. And I got up and I walked to the helicopter and got on it under my own power. So that brought my faith back full circle pretty hard. And don't get me wrong. I mean, and this is where people are, sometimes I get some people who are very diehard Christians who get mad at me. They're like, man, God gave you this massive miracle. You should never doubt again. But you know what, man? If Jesus' own disciples doubted him in the end, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I will always continue. I will believe and I will walk that path, but I will always be hungry for facts because that's how my mind works. I'm an analytical person, man. I mean, I love all Lee Strobel's books. I mean, I love apologetics. I love trying to get deeper into, what links the spiritual side of the world and religion with the fact-based side, because that's where it meets in the middle and that's where we convince more. Anyways, the bottom line is this. I never take a day for granted anymore. And I feel like God gave me a second chance for a reason. And I truly believe that reason is to try and help other people to be better. When I speak at companies and events, I speak on spiritual leadership, but I don't speak on it. I tell people, hey, religion's a strong part of my spiritual leadership. It may not be for you, and that's okay. But it's interesting, my faith shines through that because I have people come up to me all the time after I talk at companies, and I don't necessarily say anything about faith. I don't talk about that moment on the battlefield, but people come up to me and say, oh, you're a Christian, aren't you? So, there you go.
That's awesome, brother. I'm so glad I asked you because I feel like there's a lot to connect with. And I completely agree with everything that you said, especially, being in the military and, having your faith go back and forth. It is a journey. It is a journey. And the older I get, just like you said, you try to research more, understand our history, where we came from. But the fact that, you were laying there and that was a part of you, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know that that was a portion of what you did and how it triggered that for you. And I think that's amazing. And I think it just continues to show and solidify what faith does and is in all of our lives. And you know what? Like I said, it's all a journey, but I want to wrap it up right there, man, because that was beautiful. And I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope that you guys go check out what Jason has going on because it's incredible. And just listen to you talk. I took my own notes because there's things that you've been through that have helped people get better, and you've made me better just being here today. So it's been an honor having you in the building, brother. Is there anything else you want to say to our audience or anything where they can find you? And
I mean, I'll just say that I'm really excited. My new book, Overcome, comes out in December, and December 10th to be exact. It's available for pre-sale. If you go to booksamillion.com, Overcome, and put in the code Overcome 2019, it'll give you a 25% discount if you order it now for the pre-sale. But the book is everything that you and I have talked about today. It gets deep into life ambushes, how we lead ourselves, how we lead others, and then how we maintain for the long term, how we lead always so that we are always prepared and balanced for the ambushes that are coming. And I had some amazing contributors. Bill McRaven contributed. General Stan McChrystal tells the story of the Rolling Stone article and how it ended his career. And I mean, you talk about a major life ambush. I mean, overnight, a guy who, might have been on track to be the next chairman of Joint Chiefs found himself out of the military. I mean, so there's some really powerful stories. Eric Olson contributed, and some wounded warriors that I work with that have really done well and launched from their injuries. So it is a book that is designed for anyone out there. It's written really as kind of more an individual self-help leadership book, but it also has the business side. And I really think this book is going to help a lot of people. If you are struggling, if you feel like I am stuck in my life or I've had some major incident happen to me, you need this book because it will walk you through all these processes. It's going to give you some amazing inspirational stories of people who have managed to overcome and lead themselves through some pretty incredible situations.
That's awesome, brother. I'm so fired up to read it, honestly. Just from listening to you today, it's already made me better. So thank you so much, brother, for being here. I can't thank you enough.
Dom, yeah, man.
Yeah, honestly, thanks, guys, for tuning in. It's been awesome. Jay, I know you're going to run. So
yeah, man.
We're going to wrap it up here. We might do another podcast here in the future, but thanks for crushing the workout this morning and keep crushing everything, man.
Yeah, man.
Keep overcoming and making the world a better place.
Amen. All right, you
See
too.
you guys on the next one.
All right.
Out.
Out.
All right.